No one inside the roadside diner expected anything unusual that night. Not the tired waitress wiping the counter. Not the truck drivers warming their hands around coffee mugs. Not the quiet farm girl sitting alone near the window, boots still dusted with dried mud from the fields. It was supposed to be just another ordinary stop on a long highway. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Neon lights flickered above the door. The smell of fried food and gasoline hung in the air. Then the sound came. Engines, not one, not two. 20 motorcycles rolled in together, their exhausts growling like thunder across the empty road. The noise swallowed the diner before the doors even opened. When they stepped inside, laughter followed. Leather jackets soaked with rain, heavy boots hitting the floor in unison. Voices loud, careless, confident. The entire room felt smaller the moment they entered. Chairs scraped, conversations died mid-sentence, every head turned, except hers. The farm girl didn't look up. She kept her hands wrapped around her cup, fingers trembling slightly, pretending the world outside her table didn't exist. She wasn't hiding. She had simply learned, from years of being overlooked, that silence was safer than attention. The bikers took over the far side of the diner, joking loudly, ordering drinks, mocking the quiet atmosphere. To them, this place was nothing more than a stop. To her, it was shelter. She had worked since sunrise. 12 hours in the fields, cold wind, blistered hands. All she wanted was warmth and 10 minutes of peace. She didn't notice the first stare, or the second. But when laughter suddenly spiked, something shifted. A finger pointed. A chair turned. A biker leaned back and said something that made his friends howl. The girl felt it before she heard it, that familiar tightening in her chest. The feeling of being seen not as a person, but as entertainment. She lowered her head. Around her, adults pretended not to notice. Because everyone knew one thing. When 20 bikers walk in together, you don't get involved. No one realized that this moment, quiet, uncomfortable, ordinary, was seconds away from becoming something unforgettable. Because sitting only 3 stools away at the counter was a man who hadn't said a word all night, a man with calm eyes, a man with a past few people recognized, and a man who would not ignore what came next. Steven Seagal had just witnessed the first line being crossed, and he wouldn't let the second one happen. The diner had survived decades of lonely highways and forgotten towns. It stood beneath a buzzing neon sign that read "Open," even when most nights no one came. Inside, the floor tiles were cracked, the booths patched with tape, and the radio behind the counter played old country songs that no one remembered the names of. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. At least it usually was. The waitress poured coffee with the slow rhythm of someone who had done the same motion for 20 years. Steam rose gently from the mugs. The grill sizzled in the background. Outside, rain slid down the windows in thin silver lines. Everything moved calmly. The farm girl sat alone in the corner booth closest to the glass. She liked that seat because she could see the road. It reminded her she wasn't trapped, just resting. Her jacket smelled faintly of soil and hay. Her jeans were stained at the knees. The dirt under her fingernails refused to come out no matter how hard she scrubbed. She didn't mind. Those marks meant work, and work meant survival. She had been up before sunrise, feeding livestock, fixing a broken fence, hauling water when the pump failed again. By the time darkness came, her muscles burned and her hands shook from exhaustion. The diner was her reward. One warm drink. One plate of food. A few minutes where no one needed anything from her. She sipped her tea slowly, staring out at the wet highway, listening to the soft clink of dishes and the hum of conversation around her. Across the room, truck drivers murmured about weather and fuel prices. A young couple shared fries in silence. A man at the counter scrolled through his phone beside an empty plate. Nothing felt dangerous. That was the illusion. Because danger rarely arrives screaming. It arrives laughing. The bikers had settled in loud and loose, spreading jackets across chairs, dragging tables together. Their voices bounced off the walls, drowning out the radio. They weren't violent, at least not yet. Just careless. The kind of men used to taking space without asking. One of them slammed his palm on the table, telling a story that ended in roaring laughter. Another whistled at the waitress until she avoided their side completely. Still, no one confronted them. Everyone understood the unspoken rule of places like this. Don't make trouble with people who outnumber you. The farm girl felt their presence like pressure in her chest. She shifted slightly in her seat, but kept her eyes forward. She had learned early not to stare. Staring invited attention, and attention often came with consequences. At the counter, The quiet man in the black jacket listened without turning around. Steven Seagal had arrived nearly an hour earlier. He hadn't spoken much, just ordered coffee, thanked the waitress, nodded politely when someone passed behind him. He looked like any other traveler, older, broad-shouldered, calm. Nothing about him demanded attention. But awareness radiated from him. He noticed everything. The change in volume when the bikers walked in, the way the room stiffened, the way the girl by the window folded inward like she was trying to disappear. Steven had seen this pattern before, not in diners but in life. The moment when power shifts quietly, when numbers begin to feel bold, when cruelty disguises itself as humor. For now, nothing had happened. The world was still pretending to be normal. Coffee steamed, rain fell, laughter echoed. But beneath it all, something fragile had begun to crack. And everyone in that diner, whether they knew it or not, was standing in the calm right before the storm. At first, it was only laughter, the kind that filled space without meaning, careless, unfiltered. One of the bikers slapped the table and nearly spilled his drink as his story ended. The others howled, boots tapping the floor, chairs rocking backward as if the diner belonged to them. The sound rolled across the room like smoke. The farm girl stiffened. She didn't look up, but she felt it, that instinctive warning deep in her stomach. The same feeling she'd had her entire life when voices grew louder behind her. She shifted in her seat and brought her cup closer, hoping the warmth would calm the shaking in her fingers. It didn't. A biker near the edge of the group leaned back and glanced around the diner, bored eyes searching for something new. That's when he saw her, the muddy boots, the worn jacket, the quiet posture. He nudged the man beside him and whispered something. They both laughed. The girl's shoulders tensed. Another biker turned in his seat to look more closely. "Well, I'll be damned," he said loudly. "Did we ride into a barn?" A few chuckles followed. She stared at the table. Maybe if she didn't react it would pass. It usually did. But this time, it didn't. One biker cupped his hands around his mouth. "Hey, sweetheart! You lose your tractor out there?" The laughter exploded. A fork clattered against a plate on the other side of the diner. Someone muttered under their breath. But no one spoke up. The waitress paused near the kitchen door, eyes flicking nervously between the men and the girl. Then she disappeared back inside. The farm girl felt her face burn. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they could hear it. She told herself not to cry. Crying only made it worse. Another biker leaned back farther in his chair. "Bet she smells like hay and cow feed." More laughter. Someone barked like a dog. Someone else snorted. The jokes stacked on top of each other, growing bolder with every second of silence from the room. The men weren't angry. That was the worst part. They were entertained. The girl pressed her fingernails into her palm beneath the table, grounding herself. She thought about the fields, about the wind, about the sound of birds at sunrise, anywhere but here. Then a chair scraped loudly. One biker stood and took 2 steps toward her booth. He wasn't threatening. Not yet, he was smiling. "Relax," he said. "We're just joking." He leaned on the edge of her table, close enough that she could smell beer on his breath. "Why so quiet, farm girl?" Her throat tightened. She tried to speak. No sound came out. Behind her, the diner felt frozen as if everyone was holding their breath, hoping someone else would act first. No one did. The biker chuckled at her silence. "Guess she's shy." He reached down and flicked the brim of her cap. That was the moment her composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't stop. The laughter softened slightly, not from guilt, but from satisfaction. Across the room, Steven Seagal slowly set his coffee down. The porcelain made a quiet sound against the counter. Almost no one noticed. But he had seen enough. He noticed the way her shoulders shook, the way she shrank into herself, the way 20 men had convinced themselves they were untouchable. Steven had spent his life studying conflict. He knew this stage well. This was the moment bullies loved most, when fear replaced resistance. He turned slightly on his stool, his calm eyes locking onto the biker leaning over the table. The biker felt it before he understood it, that strange sensation of being watched. He glanced back. Their eyes met. Steven didn't glare, didn't threaten. He simply looked at him steady and unblinking. For a brief second, the biker hesitated. Then his friends laughed again, and the hesitation vanished. He smirked and said loudly, "What? You gonna stare me to death, Grandpa?" The room went quiet. Not completely, but quiet enough. Steven said nothing yet, because real intervention doesn't rush. It waits until the truth becomes undeniable. And in that diner, the truth was clear. This was no longer teasing, no longer joking. This was cruelty, performed loudly because the crowd had allowed it. The biker turned back to the girl. "Smile for us," he said. Steven finally stood, slowly, deliberately. The chair behind him scraped against the floor. Every head turned, because something in the air had changed. The laughter died, and for the first time that night, the bikers were no longer the loudest presence in the room. Have you ever seen someone being humiliated in public and felt helpless watching it happen? The chair scraping against the floor wasn't loud, but in the sudden stillness of the diner, it sounded like thunder. Every head turned. Steven Seagal stood there calmly, one hand resting on the counter, posture relaxed but deliberate. He didn't rush. He didn't square his shoulders like someone looking for a fight. He simply stood. The biker leaning over the farm girl's table glanced back again. "What?" he snapped. "You got something to say?" Steven took one slow step forward. The diner felt smaller with each movement. The girl didn't look up, but she felt the shift, the pressure easing slightly, like someone opening a window in a suffocating room. Steven's voice was low, even, almost gentle. "You should step away from her." The biker laughed sharply. "Oh yeah, or what?" His friends snickered from behind him, their confidence fed by numbers. "Relax, old man," another biker called out. "We're just joking." Steven didn't argue. He didn't insult them. He simply said, "She's not laughing." The words landed heavier than shouting ever could. The biker's smile twitched. "She don't gotta laugh," he said. "This is a free country." Steven nodded once. "It is," he replied. "That's why she's free not to be harassed." The room held its breath. A truck driver quietly slid his chair back, creating distance. The waitress watched from the kitchen doorway, hands pressed together. The biker straightened and puffed out his chest. "You her father or something?" Steven met his eyes. "Boyfriend." "No." "Then sit back down." Steven took another step forward, not invading space, but removing escape. "I'm the person telling you this ends now." A few bikers shifted uncomfortably. Not afraid. Uncertain. Because Steven wasn't behaving like a man trying to prove something. He was behaving like a man who already knew the outcome. The biker scoffed and turned halfway back to his friends. "Can you believe this guy?" Lauder rose again, thinner this time. He looked back at Steven and jabbed a finger at his chest. "You touch me, you're done." Steven glanced at the finger. Then back to the man's eyes. "I don't need to touch you," he said calmly. "You're doing enough damage on your own." The biker's face flushed. Insults were easy. Control was not. He shoved Steven's shoulder, not hard, not violent. Just enough to make a point. Gas rippled through the diner. The farm girl flinched. Steven took half a step back, not from force, but intention, placing himself between the biker and her. His body became a barrier. "Last warning," Steven said quietly. The biker laughed again, but this time it cracked at the edges. "You think you scare me?" Steven shook his head.
"No," he said.
"I think you're scared already." That struck something raw. The biker lunged forward, chest first, trying to intimidate. But Steven didn't move, didn't blink, didn't raise his hands. The biker suddenly realized how close he was standing. Close enough that if something happened, it would be his fault. The laughter behind him stopped completely. 20 men now watched in silence. Because something had shifted. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was accountability. "Back off," one biker muttered from the group. The man at the front ignored him. "Make me." He snapped at Steven. Steven exhaled slowly. "You don't want that." The biker shoved him again, harder this time. Coffee cups rattled. A plate slid off a table and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed. That was the moment the line was crossed. Steven's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with focus. His voice dropped even lower. "Step away from her," he repeated. The biker raised his fist, and for the first time that night, the diner felt genuinely dangerous. The farm girl squeezed her eyes shut. Someone shouted, "Hey!" But it was too late. Not because violence exploded, but because Steven moved, not fast, not wild. Precise, he shifted his weight, angled his body, and caught the biker's wrist mid-motion. There was no punch, no slam, just balance taken. The biker stumbled forward, shocked as his momentum betrayed him. Steven released him instantly. The man staggered backward, nearly falling into his friends. Silence crushed the room. Steven didn't chase, didn't threaten. He simply stood between the bikers and the girl. A wall of calm. "This isn't a fight," he said evenly. "It's a chance to walk away." No one spoke, because for the first time all night, the power in the room had changed hands. For a moment no one moved. Not the bikers, not the waitress, not even the rain tapping against the windows. The diner existed in silence. The biker who had stumbled back stared at his own hands, as if trying to understand what had just happened. There had been no punch, no slam against the wall. And yet somehow, he had lost control. His friends looked at him, confused. "That it," one of them muttered. "He didn't even hit you." The biker's face burned red. That made it worse. He hadn't been beaten. He had been exposed. "You think this is funny?" The biker snapped, stepping forward again. "You think you're some kind of hero." Steven Seagal remained where he was, body still positioned between the men and the farm girl. "I think," he said calmly, "you're about to make a mistake you won't recover from." The biker's jaw tightened. Behind him, 20 leather jackets shifted. Boots scraped the floor. Chairs moved back. The numbers were obvious. One man versus many. Someone whispered, "Back him up." The room held its breath. The biker charged, not swinging wildly, but fast enough to force a reaction. Steven didn't retreat. He pivoted. In one smooth motion, he redirected the man's momentum, guiding the arm past him instead of meeting it head-on. The biker stumbled again, crashing shoulder first into a booth. Plates rattled. Coffee spilled. A few bikers jumped to their feet. "Hey no," two rushed forward. Steven raised one hand, not threatening, not clenched. "A signal, stop," he said. The word wasn't loud, but it carried authority, something ancient and undeniable. The first biker hesitated. The second froze mid-step. Because Steven wasn't panicking. He wasn't breathing hard. He looked exactly the same as he had 5 minutes earlier. Calm, centered, unafraid. "You don't want this to turn ugly," Steven continued. "Not for her. Not for you." One biker scoffed nervously. "You think you can take all of us?" Steven shook his head. "No," he said. "I don't need to." Confusion flickered through them. He gestured subtly to the room. "Look around," he said. "Everyone's watching. Cameras are out. Police station's 3 minutes down the road." That was when they noticed it. A truck driver holding up his phone. The waitress already dialing. Reflections of flashing screens in the windows. Reality rushed in. This wasn't a Barham joke anymore. This was consequences. The biker who had started it all pushed himself up from the booth, furious. "You think you won?" he barked. Steven met his eyes. "I think you still can," he replied. The man sneered. "By walking away." Steven nodded. "By leaving with your pride bruised instead of your life ruined." Silence answered him. 20 men stood there, suddenly aware of how thin the line was between bravado and disaster. The biker looked at the farm girl. She sat frozen, eyes wide, hands clenched in her lap. Not laughing, not provoking, just trying to exist. Something shifted. The biker exhaled sharply. "This ain't worth it," he muttered. A few of his friends nodded. One slapped his shoulder. "Let's go." The leader hesitated, pride fighting survival. Then he spat on the floor. "Whatever." They began backing away. Not running, but retreating. One by one, the bikers moved toward the door, their noise gone, their confidence drained. As the door opened, cold air rushed in. Engines started outside, quieter this time. When the final bike pulled away, the diner exhaled as one. Steven finally stepped aside. He turned to the farm girl and knelt slightly to meet her eyes. "You're safe now," he said softly. She nodded, tears spilling freely at last. "Thank you," she whispered. Steven offered a small smile. "You didn't do anything wrong," he replied. "Never forget that." Around them, people slowly returned to motion. Chairs slid back. Plates were cleaned. Breathing resumed. But no one spoke loudly, because everyone there understood. They hadn't witnessed violence. They had witnessed restraint, and that was far more powerful. If you were standing there, would you step in or stay silent? The diner felt different once the engines disappeared into the night. The silence wasn't tense anymore. It was heavy, like the air after a storm has passed but the ground is still wet. Rain continued to fall outside, softer now, tapping gently against the windows as if even it had calmed down. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Not the waitress, not the truck drivers, not the young couple frozen mid-bite. Then someone let out a slow breath, and another. Life began to move again. A chair scraped quietly. A plate was lifted. Coffee was poured with hands still trembling. The farm girl remained seated in her booth, staring at the empty space where the bikers had stood only moments earlier. Her heart was still racing. The world felt unreal, like she might blink and find herself back at that table, alone again, the laughter returning. Steven stood nearby, not hovering, not crowding her. Protective, but respectful. The waitress approached slowly. "Honey," she said gently, setting a napkin in front of the girl. "You okay?" The girl nodded once, then again. Only when she tried to speak did she realize her voice was shaking. I didn't know what to do," she whispered. The waitress squeezed her shoulder. You did nothing wrong. Steven heard it. He nodded in agreement. Most people freeze, he said softly. That's not weakness, that's human. The girl finally looked up at him properly up close. He didn't look like a movie star. No glamour, no arrogance. Just tired eyes that had seen too much and chosen calm anyway. Why did you help me? She asked quietly. Steven considered the question. Because once, he said, someone should have helped me and didn't. She absorbed that in silence. A truck driver approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. Sir, he said, I wanted to step in, I just didn't know how. Steven placed a hand on the man's shoulder. You staying aware is how, he replied. You don't need fists to help someone. Sometimes presence is enough. The man nodded, relieved. Across the diner, people whispered, not gossip. Reflection. They replayed the moment in their minds, the instant when cruelty had filled the room, and one man had refused to accept it. No cheering had followed, no applause, because what they had seen didn't feel like entertainment. It felt like a reminder. The manager arrived from the back office, shaken. Sir, we're calling the police anyway, he said. Just to file a report. Steven nodded. That's the right thing. When the officers arrived minutes later, lights flashing softly against the wet pavement, there was no drama. No arrests. Just statements. They listened carefully, nodding as witnesses spoke. When they reached Steven, one officer hesitated, then smiled faintly. I thought that was you, he said. Steven returned the smile politely. The officer turned serious again. You kept it clean. Thank you. When the police left, the diner finally felt normal again, though it would never quite be the same. The farm girl finished her tea in small sips. Her hands had stopped shaking. Before she left, Steven walked her to the door. Outside, the rain had eased into mist. Her old pickup truck waited beneath the buzzing light. She turned to him. I've been laughed at my whole life, she said. Tonight was the first time someone told them to stop. Steven met her eyes. Don't let their cruelty define you, he said. Quiet doesn't mean weak, she nodded. Then unexpectedly she hugged him. A brief, grateful embrace. He patted her shoulder gently. Drive safe, he said. As she pulled away, headlights disappearing down the road, Steven returned inside. The waitress brought him another coffee. On the house, he thanked her. Around him, conversation slowly returned. But something lingered. A sense that everyone there had learned something without being lectured. That bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands still. Sometimes it speaks softly. And sometimes it simply refuses to look away. Steven finished his drink, placed a few bills on the counter and stood. As he headed for the door, the man who had been filming lowered his phone. People are going to see this, he said. Steven paused. Good, he replied. Maybe next time someone won't need me to stand up. Then he stepped back into the night, leaving behind a diner that would remember his silence far longer than any fight. The diner was quiet now. The storm outside had passed. Rain fell only as a soft drizzle, pattering gently against the windows inside. The lingering hum of conversation was different, slower, reflective, thoughtful. People sat in the booths and at the counter, replaying the night in their minds. Not the bikers' jokes, not the near chaos, but what had stopped it. Steven Seagal had left without fanfare. No cameras flashing, no dramatic exit. Just calm steps into the misty night, leaving behind a diner transformed. The farm girl lingered near the door. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her chest had stopped tightening. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, safe, seen and respected. She looked at the witnesses around her. The waitress, the truck drivers, even the other customers, they were all quietly processing the same truth. Power doesn't belong to the loudest. Strength doesn't belong to those who dominate with numbers. It belongs to the person who stands firm, protects others, and maintains control when chaos threatens. The girl's eyes scanned the diner one last time. She whispered, almost to herself, I'll remember this forever. Her voice carried across the room. People nodded, some wiping tears, others simply breathing out the tension they hadn't realized they were holding. No one cheered. No one applauded. Because the lesson wasn't entertainment. It was life-changing. Steven had shown them that. You don't need fists to protect someone. You don't need rage to stop cruelty. Real strength is silent, deliberate, and disciplined. The farm girl smiled faintly. She picked up her bag, slipped into her truck, and drove off into the misty night, carrying a new confidence. And somewhere in the shadows, the diner's customers, once frozen in fear, amusement, or indifference, carried that lesson too. They would tell others. Not with stories of violence, not with dramatics or exaggeration. They would tell it for the lesson: control is power. Respect is earned. Courage isn't loud. The diner, once just a roadside stop, had witnessed something rare. The strongest person in the room isn't the one who shouts, threatens, or dominates. It's the one who protects without losing control. If you felt the weight of this story, pause for a second and think. Who in your life deserves someone to step in for them? Where can you practice calm strength instead of reacting with anger? Because the truth is, these lessons aren't just for the movies. They're for real life. And if this story moved you, here's what you can do to spread the message. Like this video if you believe real strength comes from control, not chaos. The comment below. Would you have had the courage to stand up like Steven Seagal did? Subscribe for more stories of courage, discipline, and unexpected heroes, because every time we witness control over chaos, we remind ourselves what true power looks like. The farm girl drove into the night. The bikers were gone, leaving only the lesson. The diners went back to their lives carrying a quiet sense of awe. And the world, for a brief, shining moment, had remembered. The strongest person isn't the loudest. The strongest person protects others while staying calm. The strongest person wins without ever throwing a punch. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone needs courage in their corner, someone like Steven Seagal will appear. Or maybe that someone is you.